After the imperial rule of the Qing dynasty came to an end, a revolution took place in 1911, led by Sun Yat-sen. At that time, Sun Yat-sen envisioned a unified China under a government based on Sanmin-chu, which stands for nationalism, socialism, and democracy. On February 12, 1912, the Republic of China was officially established under the leadership of Sun Yat-sen, who later founded the nationalist party called the Kuomintang. After Sun Yat-sen passed away in 1925, Chiang Kai-shek replaced him as the leader of the Kuomintang. Initially, the Kuomintang and the Communist Party worked together and united. However, in 1927, disagreements arose, leading to a split between the nationalist and communist parties. These disputes resulted in a civil war. The conflict between the two parties was temporarily halted when Japan invaded China. They joined forces to expel the Japanese from the country. However, after the war ended, the disagreements between the two groups resurfaced, and it ended with the victory of the Communist Party. Chiang Kai-shek then fled to Taiwan, and on October 1, 1949, Mao Zedong officially proclaimed the People's Republic of China. Mao journey. Mao was born on December 26, 1893, in the village of Shaoshan, Hunan. He came from a peasant family, with his father named Mao Yichang and his mother named Wen Qimei. Despite his father being a poor farmer, Mao Yichang managed to develop his farming business over the years, providing a comfortable life for his children and wife. Although living in relatively affluent conditions, Mao's early life was marked by strict discipline enforced by his father. During his childhood, Mao attended elementary school in Shaoshan, where students were taught classical Confucianism, emphasizing the need to follow the principles of yin and yang. At the age of 13, his father insisted that Mao quit school and help work on the fields. Mao rebelled against this decision and was determined to continue his education, so he ran away from home to study elsewhere. In 1911, Mao began attending middle school in Changsha, a city filled with revolutionary fervor, where many opposed the absolute rule of Emperor Puyi and supported the Republican government. One prominent Republican figure was Sun Yat-sen. In Changsha, Mao was influenced by Sun's newspaper called People's Independence, Minli Bao, and due to this strong influence, Mao even wrote an essay at school requesting Sun to become the leader of China. As an act of resistance against the Manchu rule, Mao and a friend cut off their traditional queue hairstyles, which symbolized obedience to the emperor. After the revolution was successful, Mao resigned from the military in 1912. During his time as a soldier, Mao came across a newspaper article about socialism written by Jiang Konghu, a student who would go on to establish the Chinese Socialist Party. It was here that Mao started to become interested in the concept of socialism, although he still had some doubts. Over the next few years, Mao moved between various institutions, including a police academy, a school for household goods production, and a law school. During this time, Mao aspired to become a teacher. In 1918, he enrolled in the Hunan First Normal School and graduated with a teaching certificate. After graduating, he moved to Beijing and found a job as an assistant librarian at Peking University. While living in Beijing, Mao heard about the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, which led to the establishment of the Soviet Union. In 1921, Cheng Duxiu and Li Dajiao founded the Chinese Communist Party in Shanghai, and Mao joined the party through its Changsha branch. In 1923, Sun Yat-sen initiated a policy to cooperate with the rapidly developing Communist Party. Initially, Mao supported both the Kuomintang and the Communist Party, but a few years later, he began to adopt the ideas of Lenin. Mao thought. Mao's philosophy. Mao was not a philosopher who created his own ideas. Most of his ideas were derived from the thoughts of socialist fathers, such as Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, Lenin, and Stalin. Mao made a unique contribution in applying the ideas of dialectical materialism in practice, especially in the context of socialism. As a result, he is considered the most influential Chinese philosopher of the 20th century in history. One of Mao's most important philosophical concepts is conflict. He believed that conflict is something universal and absolute. He was convinced that conflict always exists in the process of development in all things and permeates all processes from beginning to end. This concept has similarities with the philosophical concept of yin-yang in Chinese tradition. To better understand this concept, Mao provided examples from various disciplines of science. For instance, negative and positive numbers in mathematics, action and reaction in mechanics, and positive and negative electric currents in physics. However, there have been criticisms of his thinking. While some analogies Mao presented are accurate, there are also examples considered less appropriate. This raises doubts about his overall understanding of conflict as the essence of every discipline of knowledge. Besides conflict, another important concept in Mao's philosophy is knowledge. He argued that knowledge comes from experiences in the physical world and involves active engagement. He cited examples such as knowing the taste of a guava can only be obtained by eating it, and understanding the structure of an atom can only be achieved through physics and chemistry experiments. In Mao's view, experience serves as the foundation for true knowledge. After gaining experience, one can progress and apply that knowledge in practice, which, in turn, leads to new experiences, and this process continues continuously. This concept shows that Mao not only embraced Marxism but was also influenced by the Neo-Confucianism ideas put forth by Wang Yangming in the 15th to 16th centuries. Mao and policy. Mao and party policies. Mao distinguished two types of conflicts: antagonistic and non-antagonistic conflicts. Antagonistic conflicts, according to him, can only be resolved through a struggle, while non-antagonistic conflicts can be resolved through discussion. According to Mao, the conflict between laborers and workers with capitalists is an antagonistic conflict, while the conflict between the Chinese people and the party is a non-antagonistic conflict. In 1956, Mao Zedong introduced a political policy that allowed intellectuals to voice their opinions and criticize the Communist Party. This policy was known by the slogan, "Let 100 flowers bloom and 100 schools of thought contend." However, ironically, this policy ended in failure as intellectuals felt dissatisfied with their newfound freedom and issued many criticisms against the government. Mao himself felt betrayed by them, and in response, around 700,000 intellectual members were arrested and forced to work in rural areas. Then, in 1958, Mao traveled around China and concluded that the Chinese people were talented and capable of doing anything. Based on this belief, he subsequently announced the policy known as the Great Leap Forward. This policy was a 5-year plan for forced collectivization of agriculture and rural industrialization, with a centralized state focus on increasing grain and steel production. The ultimate goal of this policy was to rapidly develop China from an agrarian economy into a modern industrial society with greater capacity to compete with Western industrial nations. In terms of agriculture, private farming was abolished, and rural farmers were forced to work on collective farms, where all production, resource allocation, and food distribution were centrally controlled by the Communist Party. Large-scale irrigation projects, with minimal input from trained engineers, were then initiated. Experimental and unproven agricultural techniques were quickly introduced throughout the country. This innovation resulted in a continuous decline in crop yields. Failed experiments and improperly built irrigation projects led to a massive outbreak of locusts, as there were no natural predators like sparrows due to the national campaign to exterminate them, as Mao considered them a major threat to grain crops. As a result, grain production sharply declined, and hundreds of thousands of people died from forced labor and exposure to the elements during irrigation and communal agricultural projects. Famine quickly struck the rural areas, leading to millions of additional deaths. People were forced to eat tree bark and even resort to cannibalism in some regions. Farmers who failed to meet grain quotas or attempted to escape were tortured and killed along with their families. They suffered beatings, mutilation in public, were buried alive, boiled in hot water, and subjected to other methods of execution. As for industrialization, the government vastly increased industrial production in urban areas. The country aimed to double steel production in the first year of the Great Leap Forward, and Mao predicted that China's industrial output would surpass that of England within 15 years. Unfortunately, the steel factories built produced low-quality and useless steel. As a result, the government confiscated and melted down metal equipment, tools, and household items for additional production fuel. Due to failures in planning and coordination, there was a shortage of resources, which often occurs in centrally planned economies. Despite significant increases in industrial investment and resource reallocation, manufacturing production did not increase as expected. Millions of surplus laborers were transferred from agriculture to steel production. Most of the transferred laborers were men, which led to their families being separated and leaving behind forced agricultural work. The collective farms previously worked by agricultural laborers were now mostly filled by women, children, and elderly people. The increased urban population added additional pressure on food distribution, and the demand for grain for urban consumption rose. Collective farm officials even falsified harvest figures so that most of the produced grain was sent to cities, based on inaccurate official figures. As a result of Mao's proposed policies, China is estimated to have lost 20 million people who died in vain. Mao Zedong believed that revolution is an ongoing process, and every revolution would inevitably create opponents, known as counter-revolutionaries. Therefore, he regularly took action and arrested those he deemed as political adversaries or traitors. One of the most dramatic and tragic events was the Cultural Revolution in 1966. During that time, students worldwide were rebelling against what they perceived as authoritarian rulers, and the same happened in China. However, in China, the students were supported by professors and party officials, including Mao himself. These students and professors formed paramilitary groups called the Red Guards. Armed with Mao's Red Book, they attacked people they saw as supporters of capitalism, Western influence, or other counter-revolutionaries. They were so zealous that they even refused to stop at red traffic lights, considering the color red as a symbol of socialism that should never halt. In 1966, the Red Guards became extremely brutal in eradicating counter-revolutionaries, leading China into a serious crisis and almost bringing the nation to ruin. The country's economy also suffered due to their actions. Eventually, Mao was forced to deploy the People's Liberation Army to confront and control their fanaticism. However, this action led to a civil war that lasted until 1968. Mao passed away in 1976. His supporters, including his wife, were arrested and punished. He was buried in a crystal casket so that people could see his body when they visited. People lined up to pay their respects, and many of them cried upon seeing the body of their deceased leader. After Mao's death, the government gradually opened up its economy to market mechanisms, leading China to embark on a capitalist path. Mao Zedong left a significant legacy in China. Regardless of whether he is liked or disliked, his role has shaped China into the vastly different country it is today. Without his contributions, China might not have achieved its current position as a global leader. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to share it with your friends if you find it useful, and if there are any mistakes, please correct them in the comments. Once again, thank you, and see you soon.